been told to evacuate.
Category 5 catastrophe. Hurricane Dorian delivers a massive blow to the Bahamas.
Please pray for us.
One of the strongest Atlantic storms ever to make landfall. Wind gusts up to 220 miles an hour. Storm surge of more than 20 feet and relentless rain.
Off in the distance, those waves crashing against the pier.
Our reporter right there, new footage in right from the eye of the storm. And now the East Coast bracing for impact. More than 2 million people told to evacuate. The warning about life-threatening storm surge. More than 1,000 flights canceled, airports shutting down. Ginger, Rob, and our extreme weather team spread out across the storm zone right now.
Also this morning, the other big headline, the search for answers after another deadly mass shooting in Texas. A gunman going on a miles-long rampage, killing 7 people, including this postal worker, and injuring 22 others, one of them a 17-month-old girl. What reportedly happened just hours before.
Kevin Hart's terrifying crash, the actor hospitalized, his car completely totaled. The very latest on his condition.
And the U.S. Open shocker, why Novak Djokovic, the #1 seed in the world, called it quits mid-match. And that moment between Coco Gauff and Naomi Osaka, inspiring fans all around the world.
Live in Times Square, this is Good Morning America.
And Good Morning America, we want to get right to Hurricane Dorian. Category 5 storm hitting the Bahamas, heading for the southeast. One of the strongest Atlantic hurricanes in recorded history, compact but fierce.
And that's why mandatory evacuations are already in place from Florida all the way up to North Carolina, and the storm leaving so much devastation in its path. Take a look at this apartment building on Abaco Island, completely destroyed.
Here's what this Category 5 storm looks like from the International Space Center's camera. And take a look at this image, chilling, showing what it's like directly inside the eye of that storm.
That's the eye right now, but the winds are fierce. Here's what we know. Dorian has made landfall in the Bahamas 3 times so far as a Category 5 storm. Winds up to 185 miles an hour. The National Hurricane Center says it's tied with the 1935 Labor Day storm for the strongest hurricane to make landfall in the Atlantic. We have team coverage all across the storm zone. Ginger starts us off from Jupiter, Florida, far from the Bahamas. Ginger, but the winds are already starting.
We've seen gusts just south of here to nearly 50 miles per hour already, George, and I'm already feeling the sand blasting my face, the bands of rain coming in, those outer bands of the storm that is still more than 100 miles to my east-southeast, barely moving. That thing is inching over the Grand Bahama Island right now at only 1 mile per hour, but that is good for the east coast of Florida and Georgia and South Carolina, because the slower it goes, the more time it has to make that fateful turn to the north. So let's go ahead and see that track, which still takes it east of the coast of Florida. Does that mean you have no impacts? Obviously not. I'm standing here 100 miles away from it and you're already feeling it. Hurricanes are not just a single point. They are broad. You can feel hurricane force winds 45 miles outside of the center of that. Look how slowly it moves. We'll still be talking right here tomorrow about the impacts up to Cape Canaveral by Wednesday morning, and eventually Thursday into Friday, South Carolina up to North Carolina. This is going to be a long story. We are in a hurricane warning here in Jupiter up to Cape Canaveral. Hurricane watches extend to the Georgia state line, even Orlando in a tropical storm force watch. And look at this. People are asking me all over social media, why hasn't it moved? How is it going to turn north? It doesn't look like it will. They're very unnerved, as well you should be. You've got those 2 high-pressure systems that are steering this, or a lack of steering. That's why it has stalled out. But eventually it'll sink back to the south, that Bermuda high, and start to help move it to the north and east. Most of those spaghetti plots do take it along the coast. We could still see 4 to 7 feet of storm surge, certainly some rain, and definitely those gusty winds. So we can absolutely have impacts here along the coast of Florida and beyond. But right now, let me tell you that that Grand Bahama Island has been dealing with this for more than 8 hours. I was in Michael last year at Category 5 for about an hour in the eye wall. They've been in it for nearly 12 by the time this thing is over with. You've got to see these pictures.
Please pray for us. Please pray for us, everyone. Please pray for us.
Dorian, the most powerful storm ever in recorded history to hit the Bahamas. Roaring into the north northern island Sunday with a 185-mile-per-hour wind, gusts potentially to 220 miles per hour.
Wind gusts of 200 miles per hour. You can see what it's doing here, and off in the distance, those waves crashing against the pier.
The wind so strong, our team, including Marcus Moore, heading inside.
Look at that. Those are the wind gusts that we have seen and that officials have warned about. This is absolutely a mind-blowing event that is unfolding right now.
One of the hardest hit islands, Abaco. Homes shredded, this video capturing the utter destruction.
Oh my God, Angie.
The violent winds ripping off roofs, toppling trees, and of course taking power and cell service. The furious rain and intense storm surge flooding streets. Jack Pittard of Lexington, Kentucky owns a home in the Bahamas. He sent us this video diary.
Look at the roofing going. And I'm worried about the structure next. Look at all the siding torn off of this house.
Boats flipped, homes shredded. The devastation all too evident in this neighborhood. The water so high you can only see the rooftops.
We've seen large pieces of debris flying in the other direction. All right, and it looks like we've just lost power.
This slow-moving storm just crawling, still torturing Grand Bahama this morning.
Now, I know that a lot of people have friends and family, not just in the Bahamas, but certainly here in Florida, and you're concerned about this track. We, of course, have folks all the way up and are going to be covering it. But I, again, can't emphasize enough that it is going to be weeks, if not months, before we get into the Bahamas to be able to get to what that type of damage can do. Guys, watching the satellite was very upsetting last night. Barely slept, and I can't imagine what it's like out there. Cecilia.
Yeah, okay, Ginger, and on that note, thank you. I want to bring in Bruce Sawyer, who rode out the storm there in Abaco Island in the Bahamas. Bruce, we are so glad you are safe and able to join us this morning. Good morning to you. Tell us what you're seeing right now.
Right now, we just have the lingering effects of the storm. We have about 50-mile-an-hour winds and rain and a little bit of lightning.
And when you look outside your windows and see your neighborhood there, what are you talking about in terms of devastation?
There's houses that are torn apart. There's tree limbs in the road. I can't even, we couldn't even evacuate right now if we needed to. There's no green shrubbery left. It's just shredded. It looked like a bomb went off.
Completely gone. Have you heard from your neighbors? Do you know if people are okay?
Actually, I've heard from some when the sun comes out or when it gets a little bit better, I'm actually going to go check on them. I've had friends calling me and asking me to check on their family members for them.
And for the folks who did ride out the storm, I understand some, in addition to yourself, some of your neighbors did ride that storm out there?
Yes, they did.
Is it true that you saw and heard stories about people evacuating during the storm?
Yeah, actually on the VHF, I heard there was someone that their house was being ripped apart and they were calling for help and they had to wait until the eye wall, until they could move. There was nothing that they could do.
So in terms of the damage there now, are you talking mostly about flooding? Is it structural?
Structural, yes. I think when the eye wall hit, we had 200-plus-mile-an-hour winds, and that ripped everybody's roofs and destroyed everybody's structure and houses.
Can you tell us what that was like to ride that storm out as it sat there for hours over your island?
Probably one of the most terrifying things that's ever happened. The windows were caving, the doors were caving in. I honestly thought that our roof was going to be ripped off as well.
And you've survived, you've rode out other storms in the past. How does this one, Dorian, compare to what you've experienced before?
It doesn't compare at all. I was never scared in the storms before. This one, I was terrified.
And your biggest concerns for your community now as the sun comes up there, Bruce?
The biggest is making sure everybody's safe.
Well, we certainly hope that that is the case. We are glad that you are safe and joining us this morning. Bruce Sawyer there on Abaco Island. Thank you so much, Amy.
All right, Cecilia, and here in the United States, more than 2 million people have already been ordered to evacuate along the coastline, 1.3 million in Georgia and South Carolina, and more than 1 million expected to be affected by evacuation orders in at least 8 Florida counties. Gio Benitez is in one of them, standing by in Daytona Beach, where a mandatory order is already in effect this morning. Gio, good morning.
Hey, Amy, good morning to you. Yeah, Ginger talked about those watches and warnings up and down the Florida coast. Well, that's why these evacuation orders are in place as well this morning. Take a look behind me, because remember, this is Labor Day in Daytona Beach, Florida, and you can just see it is just so empty. That's good news, because it means that a lot of these tourists have left preemptively. Now it's time to get the residents out. It's time to get the elderly out, especially. Take a look at this video now out of Boynton Beach, Florida. And we have police there. They're going door to door in the evacuation zones. A lot of these coastal areas, they tend to flood very easily, so they want people out now. This morning, mandatory evacuations have now been ordered from Palm Beach all the way up to Jacksonville. The governor here suspending tolls on highways to get people out easily. Let's take a look now at South Carolina, because officials there have ordered mandatory evacuations for nearly 1 million residents. That one takes effect tomorrow at noon. Amy?
And Gio, I know that you and I have both covered a lot of these storms, and when officials put out those mandatory evacuation orders, it's important to obey, but it's important to obey them now. Tell us why.
Absolutely, because you know what? If you are in the storm and you need some help, it's very likely that you won't have access to any emergency services during the storm or immediately after. So if you have that mandatory evacuation, it is time to get out. Amy.
Very important advice there, Gio. Thank you so much, George.
Amy, the entire eastern seaboard bracing for impact right now. Rob Marciano down there in Cocoa Beach, Florida, with more on the preparations. Good morning, Rob.
Good morning, George. With the eye of that catastrophic Cat 5 so close to the Florida coastline, it has been an unnerving holiday weekend, to say the least. People preparing their homes, their families, their businesses. You can see from our live drone shot just how vulnerable this coastline is to a potentially Category 4 storm surrounded by water. And for areas like this one that have been ordered to evacuate, like Gio says, today is the day to get out.
Overnight, new images showcasing the storm's strength. The overflowing rush of water eroding this Florida roadway. The tar and sand swept into the sea. In Jacksonville, panicked residents preparing for the worst. Customers stocking up on wood to board up their homes, cases and cases of water, and trying to fill up their gas tanks. This one gas station featuring a line of cars around the block. Windows in this shopping center all boarded up. Steel plates draped over these windows.
We're just trying to keep the water from getting in our houses a little bit as best as we can.
This is low tide, and look at this water run up. The issue with Dorian expecting to hug this coastline is a long duration of these powerful winds that'll push those waves, this water, against these dunes that protect the thousands of homes that line this barrier island.
Over 100 trucks seen here as power companies prepare to provide hurricane aid from the Hurricane Dorian fallout. Workers at this plant anticipating an increased need for assistance.
We're going to start working outages tomorrow. We'll have about 5 times our standard amount of resources will be here prior to the storm.
Shelters in this Palm Beach County community also offering to house people with special needs who can't evacuate, providing beds, food, and water, as well as a place to safely house pets throughout the storm.
Sunrise obscured by the cloud canopy of Dorian off the coastline today. The winds will be increasing, and that means the water will be being pushed up, and that storm surge onto these shores. Storm surge warnings are posted from South Palm Beach all the way to Titusville, including the Kennedy Space Center. Watches go from Daytona all the way to the Georgia border. That will likely be extended a good 2/3 of the Florida coastline. 4 to 7 feet of storm surge, and that means causeways that connect people to the mainland, like the one I'm standing on right here, could very well be underwater. George, back to you.
So many different dangers at the same time. Okay, Rob, thanks very much. Let's go to Amy.
George, thank you. Joining us now from Washington is Acting FEMA Administrator Peter Gaynor. Thanks for joining us this morning, Peter. As you know, this is a massive Category 5 storm. The track keeps changing, evacuations stretching from Florida to Georgia to South Carolina. Where is FEMA most focused right now?
Right now, we're most focused on South Florida. If you looked overnight to see the track of Dorian across the Bahamas, it's stalled out right now. and we're watching that because once it stalls, it becomes a little bit more unpredictable. So our message this morning is make sure that residents of Florida are prepared for any scenario, whether it stays out to sea or touches the coast or comes makes landfall. You're going to be prepared for any of those scenarios.
Are you confident that FEMA has enough resources to handle this storm through all of these states?
Absolutely. We've been at this for 5 or 6 days now. We have resources as far south as Miami and as far north as Raleigh, North Carolina, 700 miles. We have all our partners, to include DOD and the entire federal family, supporting this effort, this response. We have plenty of resources, plenty of staff, plenty of material for whatever Dorian does during this trek north.
Yeah, in terms of whatever Dorian does, there are so many threats from this storm because of its massive size. Of course, you've got winds, rain, storm surge. What are you most concerned about right now?
You know, storm surge, it's water and flooding that cause the most deaths from natural disasters. 90% of all deaths from natural disasters are caused from flooding, surge, inland flooding. And half of those deaths are caused from deaths in cars, people driving through flooded waters. What we really want to get to across this morning is that, you know, time is running out to make preparations. If you're in South Florida, West Palm Beach, you're feeling the winds right now. You need to take precautions because, again, the unpredictability, the uncertainty of where Dorian will go is something that we're all anxious to find out. But you have to be prepared for any scenario today.
Yeah, so what is your message this morning for anyone who is in Florida, in Georgia, in South Carolina, even North Carolina right now?
First of all, heed the directions of your local emergency managers and public officials. They know best. If you're issued mandatory evacuation orders or voluntary evacuation orders, you should really consider that. You know, if you think you got to tough it out in your home, that's probably the wrong idea. If you issued a mandatory evacuation, don't tough it out. Get out. You know, save your life, save the life of your family. Make the smart choice today because, again, the clock is ticking when it comes to Dorian and landfall on the south coast of Florida.
Yeah, potentially life-saving advice there. Thank you so much, Acting FEMA Administrator Peter Gaynor.
Thank you.
President Trump visited FEMA headquarters Sunday for hurricane briefing and raised some eyebrows by recounting what he'd learned.
I'm not sure that I've ever even heard of a Category 5. I knew it existed, and I've seen some Category 4s. You don't even see them that much, but a Category 5 is something that I don't know that I've ever even heard the term, other than I know it's there. That's the ultimate, and that's what we have, unfortunately.
Our senior national correspondent Terry Moran at the White House. And Terry, the president has also been sending out bulletins on Twitter.
He sure has, George. He said that about Category 5 hurricanes before. It's his way of really sounding the alarm, and he is using that Twitter feed, its 64 million followers, to urge people to heed the warnings, to listen to their local officials, follow their instructions. And it's almost as if you're following the storm with the president. He asked for prayers for Bahamas. He also said at one point that people in Alabama needed to be prepared for a hurricane that will hit very hard. That was wrong. The National Weather Service putting out a correction, so the president watching it in real time and offering his style of leadership. George?
Terry Moran, thanks. We're going to be tracking the latest on Dorian all morning long. We also have new details about that deadly mass shooting in Texas. But right now, let's go back to Ginger in Jupiter.
And one last note, George, just seeing that video from inside the eye from those hurricane hunters that are working so tirelessly to bring us the data, updating us every hour, that is called the stadium effect. All right, let's get to the select cities now, brought to you by Amazon Prime.
Warm and muggy out the door this morning. Temperatures in the 70s. By lunchtime, partly cloudy, 82, so a little more sunshine compared to yesterday. 88 at 4 o'clock. Whatever you're doing this afternoon and early this evening, heads up. We could have a few isolated thunderstorms. Tomorrow, it's back to work and back to school. It is going to be warm but dry. Sunny skies at the bus stop tomorrow morning. 81 for the kids outside at recess and 85 tomorrow afternoon when the kids are getting off the bus. 92 Wednesday, cooler, watching Dorian late week.
Tracking the hurricane all day long here at ABC. A lot more coming up here on GMA.
hurricane churning for more than 24 hours over the Bahamas. Homes wiped away, gusts reaching more than 220 miles an hour. Authorities there saying, pray for us. And now tonight, where does Dorian go next? Dangerously close to Florida. Will it hug the coast? Will it make landfall in the U.S. as it heads north? Evacuation orders for millions. Meteorologist Ginger Z and Rob Marciano with the new track and the new concerns as we head into the night. The other major story tonight, the horror on board a boat just off the coast. A massive fire and explosion on board a diving boat. Passengers on an excursion. Fire erupting in the middle of the night, passengers sleeping, the crew jumping into the ocean. Several bodies discovered, more than 24 passengers unaccounted for. And tonight we are learning there were 3 groups celebrating birthdays. Another deadly mass shooting in America tonight. New reporting at this hour, at least 20 different crime scenes in Texas. The gunman fired from his job 15 minutes beforehand. His boss calling authorities to warn them. And it turns out the gunman called the FBI 2 minutes before the rampage. Carjacking and killing a postal worker, among others, a 17-month-old baby hit by shrapnel and survived. Also tonight, actor Kevin Hart and the major car accident, what authorities have now revealed. The West Point cadet and the deadly accident, the cliff that gave way in the Northeast. And the Labor Day parade called off. Explosives found outside a home.
This is ABC World News Tonight with David Muir.
Good evening, and it's great to be with you on this Labor Day holiday. We are here tonight because there are several major stories: that horrific scene, the deadly boat explosion, the mass shooting this weekend, and of course, we are tracking Hurricane Dorian. Where will this massive hurricane go next? Tonight, hovering dangerously close to Florida. At this hour, it is churning just 100 miles off the coast. A major Category 4 hurricane, winds of 145 miles an hour as we come on the air. Dorian already landing a devastating blow in the Bahamas, hammering the islands relentlessly for more than 24 hours. As a Category 5 hurricane there, it was merciless. The images now coming in of the horrific destruction in its wake after the wind, of course, the floodwater surging in. Tens of thousands of homes damaged or destroyed tonight. At least 5 people have died. That toll growing. Tonight, where does this monster hurricane go next? And the models at this hour that show it coming very close to the coast, and how just a small shift in the coming hours could be devastating. Chief Meteorologist Ginger Z is live in Jupiter Beach, Florida tonight with the newest track and the timing for us. Ginger?
David, it is so hard to imagine that that beast that is about 100 miles to my east-southeast has been stationary for the last 2 hours. It's only moved 16 miles since 7 a.m. this morning, but it will start its path north-northwest tonight. It'll start tonight, it'll go through tomorrow, and that's what that track shows. So it remains offshore, but remember, a hurricane is not a point. It is a wider thing than that. 45 miles outside of the center, you can feel hurricane force winds. So all the way up through Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, we're going to be talking about this through the end of this week. Let's talk about why, though. A lot of people are asking, how and when is it going to move? Because it hasn't. Well, you've been blocked by this ridge of high pressure and another one actually over the south. But you see on this water vapor imagery, that trough is going to help kick it to the north and eventually east. It'll work kind of like a gear, that high pressure system, and it'll start to slide it up the coast and away from the U.S. So that's what we're looking for. It eventually makes its way up to Canada. But in the meantime, you don't have to have it hit you to have wind gusts of up to near 70 miles per hour like we will here tomorrow afternoon. Jupiter close to 70, Vero Beach 58. Look at the northern part, Daytona at 50, and those hurricane watches go all the way up to South Carolina. You could also see 4 to 7 feet of storm surge, David.
And just to reiterate, Ginger, this is not about landfall. You will feel the effects of this along the East Coast.
You will, absolutely will. Rainfall, especially up in South and North Carolina, too.
All right, we'll track it all week with you, Ginger. Thank you. It, of course, was a horrific scene in the Bahamas, a Category 5 hurricane churning for hours, just really sitting there. Homes wiped away, no power tonight, devastation everywhere you look. And ABC's Marcus Moore was right there with our team.
Tonight in the Bahamas, a life-threatening storm surge sweeping across the island nation.
This is very deep water.
The storm came ashore on the Abaco Islands on Sunday. With Category 5 hurricane force winds gusting above 225 miles per hour, cars and entire homes submerged for more than 24 hours straight.
You can see what it's doing here, and off in the distance, those waves crashing against the pier.
Our team moving inside for safety.
I don't know how well you can see it, but I want you to listen to the wind and the howl of the wind as it goes by. We've seen large pieces of debris flying in the other direction. All right, and it looks like we've just lost power.
The storm soon destroying our equipment. Authorities warning residents they're on their own, telling them to use hammers to break through the attic if necessary. As the eye passed over one mother pleading for prayers live on Facebook.
Everyone, please pray for us, please. Please, my baby's only 4 months old. Please pray for us. People trying to make it to the other side where this white house is, but some people, the water just took them.
The roof ripped off of her apartment building, soon sheltering again with other families.
This is the only safe place we could be right now.
On Grand Bahama Island this morning,
y'all sure we can make this?
John Forbes and his family racing to get to his neighbor's two-story home.
They're getting a lot of distress calls. The person's needing rescue, needing to be rescued, but we cannot get to them right now.
And we are seeing the catastrophic damage in Dorian's wake.
Lenny's house. Used to be Lenny's house. What's left of it? Unreal.
Tonight, reports that as many as 13,000 homes are damaged or destroyed, and a grandmother now grieving over the loss of her grandson.
Did they say how he died?
I think they say he drowned.
The death toll now at least 5 and certain to rise.
And Marcus Moore reporting in now on the phone from the Bahamas. And Marcus, I know you and the team were hunkered down during this hurricane, but as we so often see, when the hurricane is right over you and you have the eye over you, there's often a brief moment when you can go outside, a brief break before the second half of that hurricane comes in. You went outside and you could actually hear screams.
Yeah, David, we heard those screams and looked off in the distance and saw 4 people at a house that was surrounded by the storm surge, the water rushing by, and our producer, Scott Schulman, ran towards them and told them to swim. And they got in that water. It was 3 women, 2 teenage girls and a woman and a man. They swam across and made it. And they are thankful to be alive tonight. And it really was a race against time, because the eye was moving across the area, and we knew any moment that the intense storm could return.
All right, Marcus, we're just glad that you and Scott and the entire team there are okay and that that family is okay as well. This is why authorities tonight are saying remain vigilant when it comes to the track of this hurricane. A slight change could spell real trouble here at home. Tonight, more than 2 million Americans are under mandatory evacuations from Florida all the way up to North Carolina. This is from South Carolina late today. All lanes of Interstate 26 right there actually heading in the same direction away from the shore. Thousands of flights canceled up and down the coast. Operations halted at this hour at 11 Florida airports. The Orlando airport, the main one there, shuts down tomorrow. ABC's Gio Benitez is in New Smyrna Beach tonight.
Tonight, with more than 2 million people ordered to evacuate from Florida all the way to North Carolina's Outer Banks, the message from authorities is clear.
If you're in your mandatory, you just have to get out.
Dorian now menacing the Florida coast just over 100 miles offshore. Some still boarding up. We met Lenny Glover as we headed further inland. So right now you're just watching and waiting.
Like everybody else in Volusia County.
But tonight, so many have already left their homes and businesses behind. We've now made it more inland, but just take a look. Even here, business after business is just boarded up. People are listening to those warnings. It's a ghost town here.
Mandatory evacuation is now in place. Please collect your belongings, vacate, and seek shelter.
In Boynton Beach, police going door to door. Patients at hospitals and dozens of nursing homes are being moved inland. In South Carolina, all lanes of this highway are now leading away from the coast. Tonight, many in Charleston are still filling sandbags. Our Steve Olsensami is there.
People are deciding to stay in many instances and are getting sandbags or locations all across town.
And tonight, about 8,000 troops standing by up and down the coast, emergency vehicles in position.
So let's get to Gio with us live tonight as well from New Smyrna Beach, Florida. And Gio, you were telling us a short time ago there are still people who are evacuating tonight?
Oh, absolutely, David. A lot of people are watching and waiting to see what this storm does, but it's not too late to leave. So if you do decide to evacuate, make sure you're taking your medications with you and, of course, some important documents just in case. David.
But I'm glad to hear people are heeding the call, Gio. Thank you. We will go back for another look at this storm track at the end of the broadcast tonight. But in the meantime, we're going to move on now to that horror on a scuba diving boat off the coast of Southern California. We have new reporting on this as well. An explosion.
Breaking news tonight on several fronts as we come on the air this Labor Day. The disaster at sea, a boat sinking in flames off California. Multiple people killed. The inferno erupting as they slept, trapped below deck. 5 crew members jumping into the water to escape. Tonight, families desperate for answers. Also breaking, Hurricane Dorian turning deadly. The Category 4 monster carving a catastrophic path in the Bahamas. Torrential rains, powerful winds, massive floods. Homes are shredded, cars underwater. Tonight, the southeast is bracing for impact. Much of Florida's east coast under a hurricane warning. Anxiety growing up through Virginia. The race against time as more than 1 million people are ordered to evacuate. Our team in place in the storm zone, and Al Roker with the new track. New clues in that mass shooting in Texas, police revealing what happened just before the random firing began, and new video of the moments of terror as it unfolded. A scare in midair after an instructor passes out at the controls. His student pilot radios the tower.
This is my first, listen.
How he landed the plane single-handedly.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening, I'm Kate Snow in for Lester tonight. They were experienced divers who signed up for an adventurous holiday weekend trip off the coast of Santa Cruz Island near Los Angeles. 39 people were on board the diving boat when it caught fire in the darkness early this morning. The passengers asleep in berths down below. Tonight, family members are desperate for information about how crew members escaped while divers perished. Gotti Schwartz has the details.
At 3 a.m. off the coast of a California island, a frantic call. That mayday coming from the Conception, a 75-foot boat fully engulfed in flames.
I can't breathe. 39 POV.
Over the radio, a man identifying himself as the captain telling the Coast Guard dozens of passengers were trapped below deck. Sleeping in bunks seen here, 34 divers on a 3-day scuba excursion along California's Channel Islands. 5 crew members awake on the upper deck jumped overboard to escape the flames, then used a dinghy to reach another boat for help, all while 33 passengers and 1 crew member remain trapped below deck.
Can you get back on board and unlock the boat, unlock the doors so they can get off? There's no escape hatch for any of the people on board.
Witnesses described hearing explosions during the fire, but authorities say it's still too soon to tell how the fire started. The Coast Guard saying so far they've recovered 4 bodies, 2 males, 2 females, while an additional 4 victims were located on the ocean floor near the vessel. 26 other victims remain unaccounted for.
Did the crew try to help the other passengers?
I don't have any additional information regarding that.
The Conception's burned-out hull sunk shortly after sunrise. Tonight located in shallow waters and upside down just 60 feet off the coast of Santa Cruz Island.
I think we all should be prepared to move into the worst outcome.
Rescuers will continue their search through the night, but so far, no sign of survivors.
And Gotti joins us now. Gotti, there are just so many unanswered questions.
Yeah, and a growing call for answers. Kate, specifically, did this boat have a fire evacuation plan? Did it have fire suppression equipment on board, smoke detectors, fire extinguishers? Did it have just one escape hatch? And how was it that the crew was able to make it off the boat, but the passengers were not? All of these questions remain unanswered at this point, but such a tremendous loss of life that the NTSB team is now sending 16 people to help with this investigation.
Gotti Schwartz out in California. Gotti, thank you. Now to the other major headline tonight. Hurricane Dorian, still an extremely dangerous Category 4 storm, battering the Bahamas and posing a powerful threat to the southeastern U.S. Our team is in place in the storm zone. But first, Al Roker's here with the new track. Al, all eyes are on this storm tonight. What are you seeing?
Kate, Dorian continues to confound. Right now, it's stationary with 145-mile-per-hour winds. Hurricane warnings now stretching all the way from just north of West Palm Beach to the Georgia border. Hurricane watches up to Charleston, and so we continue to watch this system as it makes its way up along the coast as a Category 3 storm on Wednesday, moves along the Carolinas, and then out to sea sometime Friday afternoon. We expect to see hurricane force and tropical force winds from north of Miami all the way to the Carolinas and as far as storm surge from West Palm Beach up to Wilmington, upwards of 6 to 9 feet of storm surge and isolated areas of 15 inches of rain along the coast. But, Kate, a wobble 15 miles or either way could really impact who feels the strongest impacts of Dorian. Kate?
All right, Al, I know you'll keep an eye on it. And tonight, officials in the Bahamas are calling the devastation from Dorian unprecedented. The images coming in tonight showing homes demolished and streets underwater from widespread flooding. And late today, the Prime Minister confirmed at least 5 deaths on the hard-hit Abaco Islands. Morgan Chesky is in the Bahamas for us.
The water continues to rise.
Tonight, the Bahamas torn apart. Dorian, a slow-moving monster, swallowing homes, mangling cars, and pushing an angry sea onto people's doorsteps.
We're literally in the ocean.
On Grand Bahama, David Mackey gave a chilling play-by-play. His home on stilts, no match for a 2-story storm surge.
Far beyond anything we've ever imagined or ever experienced.
On Abaco Island, prayers for a family as Dorian turned deadly.
I want to say our son, my grandson dead. That's it.
The grandmother of Lachino McIntosh in tears after she said her grandson drowned seeking shelter. Today, conditions remain so bad, the U.S. Coast Guard couldn't move in until late this afternoon, rescuing dozens, but leaving many fearing the worst.
What's your biggest fear right now as a dad?
My biggest fear right now is my son's safety.
Robert Monroe's son, part of the Bahamian military stationed in Abaco. His last message, the weather is picking up. Since then, silence.
The storm came, and then all communication was lost at this time. Nothing.
Right now, flooding is among the biggest concerns, with cars submerged at police headquarters on Grand Bahama as Dorian dumps foot after foot of rain.
Know that there's severe flooding, and we fear for the lives of many there.
Tonight, the Bahamas Prime Minister tells me help is on the way, but stresses he's never seen such a powerful storm.
It's disheartening. It's as if we're fighting a war with the enemy having all the weapons at its disposal, and we have absolutely nothing. We're hopeless. The only thing we have to us is God, so we can pray to God and ask God to bring us through.
And again, the Prime Minister confirming Dorian is now responsible for at least 5 deaths here in the Bahamas. He went on to tell me he plans to visit Abaco Island tomorrow to witness the devastation firsthand and begin that long plan of recovery. Kate?
Morgan, thank you. And of course, people on the East Coast are nervously watching Dorian's track. More than 1 million residents up through the Carolinas are being warned to get out and get out now. NBC's Gabe Gutierrez is on the Florida coast.
Mandatory evacuation is in effect right now.
Tonight, more than 1 million people from Florida to Georgia to South Carolina are being ordered to evacuate.
I'm worried about the flooding at this point.
Florida's governor says dozens of medical facilities have already cleared out. Power crews ready to roll.
Get out now while you have time, while there's fuel available, and you'll be safe on the roads.
Hurricane warnings are now in effect for a chunk of the Florida coast. At the ready, 4,500 members of the state's National Guard.
It could be potentially devastating. Of course, we hope it's not, but hope's not a plan.
Today, Jean Lynch and her husband took no chances, leaving their home for one of Florida's 85 emergency shelters. What's your biggest concern?
It creeps up on you. You don't even notice it. You'll be standing here and it's like this one, and then all of a sudden, boom, it's like somebody dropped a drum full of water on you.
Though the monster storm is churning well offshore, it's already threatening the livelihood of shrimpers during a crucial time of year.
This comes in here, that's what messes us up.
Across the U.S., more than 1,000 flights canceled today. Airports in Fort Lauderdale and West Palm Beach are shut down. Orlando International closing tomorrow.
I've never experienced a hurricane. Hopefully I can get out of here before that happens, but fingers crossed.
Tonight, the race to dodge Dorian.
Who in their right mind would stay in a trailer during a hurricane?
Is underway.
Right now, this area is under a mandatory evacuation order. Most homes and businesses here are boarded up and cleared out. The outer bands of Dorian have been bringing wind and occasional rain here throughout the day, but with the storm moving so slowly, the worst here is apparently yet to come, Kate.
All right, Gabe, thank you. With Dorian bearing down, tonight we're getting an extraordinary look inside the eye of the storm from those brave enough to fly right into the beast. Here's NBC's Katie Beck.
Inside the cockpit of Air Force hurricane hunters, scientists look Dorian square in the eye. Major Alex Boykin is at the controls of today's flight.
We'll be bringing the
winds on the way in and through the eye wall, and then we'll be able to track its movement if it begins to stall or turn. This one has been very hard to predict.
These Air Force and NOAA high-flying weather stations travel through turbulent conditions, slicing through the eye wall of the hurricane to determine the conditions at the heart of the storm. Probes are dropped into the hurricane to measure pressure, temperature, humidity, wind speed, and direction.
Getting the information that we need, vital to knowing how strong the hurricane is and also where it's going.
But even given all of the information gathered from up above, it's difficult for forecasters to predict exactly what will happen here along the coast.
We also need to know the steering current, so well away from the storm. We need to know maybe 1,000 miles away.
Forecasters use the data and other sources like buoys, weather balloons, and satellites to track slow-moving Dorian, analyzing new information as it comes in. The slightest shift in course could be the difference between dodging danger or disaster. The work continues as the powerful eye of Dorian sets sights on the East Coast. Katie Beck, NBC News, Savannah, Georgia.
Tonight, deadly Hurricane Dorian is headed here to Florida's East Coast after devastating winds rip the roofs of houses in the Bahamas. Waves come in through the attic. Floodwaters nearly as high as the trees.
Please, someone please come help us.
Catastrophic damage is reported.
Please pray for us. Please pray for us.
In the U.S., millions hit the road to escape the storm as Dorian's outer bands hit the southeast coast. We spoke with a family hoping to ride out the storm. We're live tracking the storm from Florida to South Carolina.
Forecasters say this storm is powerful and it's unpredictable.
Also tonight, dozens of deep-sea divers are feared dead after their dive boat caught fire off Southern California. We have the frantic Mayday call. I can't breathe. New details on the deadly mass shooting in Odessa, Texas. The gunman called the FBI and 911 before the attack. Police tell CBS News there were 15 different crime scenes. Surprising results in a study on weight loss surgery. It may have benefits far beyond just losing weight. And as the storm remains a threat, Americans are opening their hearts to the Bahamas.
This is the CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell, reporting tonight from Cocoa Beach, Florida.
And this is our Western edition. Good evening from one of the barrier islands tonight that is under mandatory evacuation orders. We are following two breaking news stories tonight. The winds are picking up here as this monster storm, Hurricane Dorian, is headed dangerously close to this area with now 25 million people in its projected path. We're also following another breaking news story in the west. Dozens are feared dead after a dive boat caught fire off the California coast. We're seeing devastating images of flames and hearing desperate calls for help. We are live from that scene tonight. But first, the latest on this catastrophic Hurricane Dorian. The life-threatening storm is unleashing unprecedented devastation in the Bahamas. It struck as a Category 5 with sustained winds of 185 miles an hour. Gusts over 220 tore the roofs off houses. An estimated 13,000 homes were damaged or destroyed. Floodwaters reached the tops of trees. Cars were piled up like children's toys, and at least 5 deaths are reported. The search for victims is just beginning tonight. Now, right back here in the U.S., Dorian could hit nearly 1,000 miles of coastline. That is more than 5.5 million people who have been ordered to evacuate. Now, despite that order, some families told us they don't want to leave. Tonight, Dorian is still packing 145-mile-an-hour winds. Watches and warnings are up now in 3 states, Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina. That's new, the South Carolina part. Up to 80% of the beaches from Florida to North Carolina could be damaged by erosion. Tonight, the Hurricane Center is roughly about 100 miles offshore, and it is parked over Grand Island in the Bahamas. That's right. It is not moving, and it's forecast to turn west to northwest in the next 24 hours. The center may not make landfall here in Florida, but we've heard that even a glancing blow could bring hurricane-force winds to the coast, along with disastrous storm surge. The question is where and when? Well, we've got a team of correspondents covering this from South Florida to Charleston, South Carolina. Dorian has been pummeling the Bahamas for a day and a half. Scientists say it's like having an 4 tornado over your house for 30 hours. Imagine that. Now, some of the islands are just 4 feet above sea level and were hit by a storm surge of up to 23 feet, higher than the roof line of most homes. Today, the Prime Minister said his country is at war with Hurricane Dorian, but is without a weapon to defend itself.
Please pray for us. Please.
Desperate cries for help tonight as monster Hurricane Dorian pounded the Bahamas for more than a day as a Category 5. With catastrophic winds tearing off roofs, toppling trees, and downing power lines. The storm surge claiming at least 5 lives in the Abacos, including a young boy, with fears there could be many more. Bahamian Prime Minister Hubert Minnis.
The initial reports from Abaco is that the devastation is unprecedented and extensive.
Residents scrambled to their attics, trying to escape the storm surge as high as 23 feet, as authorities urged people to grab hammers to break out of attics. More than 4 feet of rain is expected in the next few days.
Complete devastation. Look at these cars, man.
It was the strongest hurricane to hit in modern history.
Tonight, the monster storm is expected to get dangerously close to here in Florida, where nearly 4 million are under mandatory evacuation orders in 12 counties. The other counties in yellow are under voluntary evacuations.
Governor Ron DeSantis.
And if you're ordered to evacuate, you need to do that.
Here in Cocoa Beach, Florida, where the hospital has been evacuated.
That's your hurricane fence.
Yeah. So
the Gash family and their 2 dogs are riding out the storm.
So this is really just to stop the rain more than...
And we had to crawl under their shuttered front door.
Never been in someone's house like this before.
Inside, they've stocked up with mac and cheese, ramen noodles, and Cocoa Puffs.
Whose Cocoa Puffs are these?
Their sons are aged 11 and 8.
The forecasters say this storm is powerful and it's unpredictable.
Yeah.
Right.
It's got to worry you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We've been through so many.
Cautiously,
optimistic. Yep.
Their home sits surrounded by water, but for now, they're staying put.
I do think if the hurricane kind of wobbles and comes closer, then we can go inland a little bit. So that's kind of my reassurance of we're keeping an eye on it.
A shocking tragedy. Thank you, Jonathan. And back here in Florida, towns up and down the coast are becoming deserted. Janet Shamlian joins us from Jupiter. That's about 120 miles south of here. Janet, how's the wind and weather there?
Well, Nora, conditions are getting worse very quickly here. The storm is 100 miles to the east. We're in between rain bands right now, but the wind is kicking up. It is churning the surf, and it is foretelling of what is to come. There is a mandatory evacuation order in effect. People are being warned to stay in their homes at their own risk. Restaurants, businesses, stores are all closed, and schools here will stay closed until Thursday. City officials tonight are planning for street flooding and for power outages because of the storm. And tonight, Nora, they are warning people not to come down here and sightsee at the beach. Nora?
All right, Janet, thank you. Nearly a quarter of Florida's population is over 60. 93 nursing homes and 7 hospitals have been evacuated ahead of Dorian. And Mark Strassman is in St. Augustine, and he found some folks who live a block from the beach but don't want to leave.
This community has a mandatory evacuation order, but Sergeant Chrissy Paget can't really enforce it.
Are you going to be staying? Well, I prefer to stay.
And Patricia Lawrencell won't leave. She's 96.
Are you nervous about this one, or are you okay?
Uneasy.
She packed a bag just in case. We also met 70-year-old Casey Kelber heading upstairs to check on his neighbor, 75-year-old Buzz Rossman. Both will stay put for now.
If the wind gets over 120 miles an hour, we're going to have to vacate.
Yeah, right.
More than 8 million seniors live in Florida's East Coast counties and face the menace of Dorian.
I probably can't run anymore, but I can trundle out to my car and take off.
Kelber agrees that's not much of a plan.
What are you worried about?
I just about him being able to get out of here, because he does move sort of slow and he's a little bit, fragile.
We gave both their names and address to local police to check on them because, Nora, they belong to a group that's a major worry here, hurricane holdouts who are also seniors.
All right, Mark, thank you. And late today, the National Hurricane Center extended hurricane storm surge watches to South Carolina. Jamie Yukis is in Charleston, and Jamie joins us now, and I imagine that city has good reason to be worried tonight.
Nora, absolutely. Charleston is known as low country, which means it's extremely prone to flooding. That's why businesses have already started boarding up, even though Dorian's forecast is days out. The governor also taking things seriously, ordering a mandatory evacuation for almost 1 million people across the coastline. They're all headed in one direction, and that's out to higher ground. Now, homeowners, before they left, picked up sandbags to try to protect their homes from potential floodwaters. One location told me today they gave out 750 sandbags in 1 hour. You can see businesses here in historic downtown Charleston also using that sandbags to protect their merchandise and other items inside the stores because they're worried Dorian will make its way here. Nora?
All right, Jamie, thank you. And you can see the wind and rain is picking up here. Meteorologist Megan Glaros of WBBM in Chicago joins us now. So, Megan, what have you seen change today in this storm's track?
Right. Today, it's becoming a little bit more certain that that turn to the north is going to happen, Nora, but it has yet to occur. And right now, it is still sitting stationary, not moving at all over Grand Bahama Island. It's been over the Northwest Bahamas for over 30 hours already. We likely have another 24 hours, but eventually, while we've lost steering currents for now, this trough where you see that brown area right there, it's going to pick the storm up and start to accelerate it on off to the north and northwest. That's when it will make its closest approach to Florida. This occurs probably as a Category 3 storm, rapidly accelerating and then becoming an issue for the Carolinas as we move into Thursday and Friday. So this storm not done yet, but we are waiting for that very critical turn. I think the closest approach to hurricane force conditions in your area, Nora, will likely be tomorrow evening.
All right, Megan, thank you. And the rain has really picked up here. We learned today that the gunman who went on a killing spree in West Texas called the FBI and 911 just minutes before Saturday's rampage. The 7 people who were killed ranged in age from 15 to 57. 23 others were wounded, including a 17-month-old girl. Maria Villarreal has new developments tonight from Odessa, Texas.
The FBI believes Seth Ader's downward spiral began long before this mass shooting. He'd been calling the FBI tip line for years, leaving rambling, incoherent messages. Then Saturday morning, he was fired from his job at a trucking company.
I want to be clear, he showed up to work in a very distressed mental state, so it's not because he got fired.
There are reports of people citing him with a rifle. Those reports did come in. Officers did respond to those areas, and he was just gone.
Before and during the shooting rampage, he called police and the FBI tip line.
He said that he was the guy doing it.
Ader's mobile mass shooting took him on a 10-mile journey from Midland County into Odessa, leaving a trail of 15 individual crime scenes.
I saw a very large gun come up out of the car.
Shauna Saxton was driving when the suspect pulled up beside her and pointed a gun.
I was honking. And clearly I was traveling weird and I maybe got somebody's attention.
He was eventually confronted by police near the Synergy movie theater. 7 people died as a result of the shooting. 23 more were injured, including 17-month-old Anderson Davis, recovering at home today after surgery to remove shrapnel in her chest and injuries to her face.
The FBI searched the shooter's home right behind me. It was a chaotic mess is what they said. We also know that he failed a background check recently and was not allowed to legally buy a gun. On top of that, right now they are investigating how we got a hold of that AR-style assault rifle. Nora?
All right, Maria, thank you. And still ahead on the CBS Evening News, as the rain picks up here, how you can help the hurricane victims in the Bahamas. As we begin to feel the effects of Dorian here, the hurricane continues to pound the Bahamas. That country needs help, and South Florida is coming through. The city of Miami has created 16 drop-off locations to collect donations. That includes fire stations and some churches. The city's commissioner is hoping a near miss so far in Miami will mean people donate what they bought in preparation for Dorian. They're asking for things like water, canned goods, and baby formula. The supplies will make it to the Bahamas on Wednesday if weather allows. Meanwhile, world-renowned chef Jose Andres is on the ground in the Bahamas, getting ready to feed the people there. He hopes to be able to be in the impacted areas by tonight. If kitchens are destroyed, they will build a makeshift one and cook in big paella pans. We spoke to him from his prep kitchen.
What I hope we are going to do is to feed everybody. And we're going to do it fast, quick, and with the least amount of money possible. And that's what we are here for. To make sure that anybody that is hungry in these islands in the north of Nassau, that will get food sooner rather than later.
This is a historic storm, so if you want to make a donation to one of the organizations helping, visit cbsnews.com/Dorian Help. And that is the CBS Evening News. I'm Nora O'Donnell in Cocoa Beach, Florida. We'll see you tomorrow on CBS This Morning and right back here on the CBS Evening News.